Poso maoni wiak, waiwanan kitanan ni mua e yoski piataya posnotaman e yum MITW Podcast. A yospis piataya posnapi notaman e ne hisikimaka e yoso matnamin e hakihi.
Welcome to the Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin podcast. I'm your host, Sheena Wapus. On this episode, I'm joined by Vaughn Bowles, Public Information Officer for the Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin. Welcome, Vaughn.
Afternoon, Sheena.
So a couple of weeks ago, we had a listening session that was hosted talking about suggestions from the community for the COVID relief funds that the tribe received. Is there any updates on that?
So as far as like tribal relief fund goes, I'm not privy to those discussions because that's not my area of expertise. I'm not a tribal member. I do know they are working on getting some of that relief money to the tribal members as part of the incentive program for the vaccination. They've been looking at, housing options, upgrading housing, repairing housing, starting new housing, basically trying to provide a safer and a healthier environment for tribal members to live in. So, things like COVID don't spread nearly as quickly the next time something like this may come to the community. So I'd love to give you more specifics. I just don't know them, unfortunately.
Okay, so recently we had more of an uptick in vaccinations due to the incentive that went live a few weeks ago. So where do we stand now locally with our vaccination rates?
So locally, we are actually doing really well. We're number 4 in the state as far as counties with the level of vaccination. We're at 65% for total vaccinations. We've vaccinated 2,962 people that live in the county. That also doesn't take into account tribal employees and tribal members that live off reservation. So we've really done a great job of getting the word out and getting people vaccinated.
Great.
As far as our population goes, no, there's more. It's really good news. Yeah, no, that's good stuff. For individuals 65 and older, we've vaccinated 94.5% of those individuals, and they're the individuals most at risk for severe cases of COVID. So that's fantastic. Individuals 45 to 54, we've vaccinated 84%. 55 to 64 is 87%. But here's something I find really encouraging. In the reservation or on the county, however you want to describe it, individual age group of 35 to 44 has 97% of the individuals vaccinated now. So really doing a great job. We just started vaccinating our youth, but for the age group of 12 to 15, we have 85% of them vaccinated. So really doing a great job with vaccination. Our lowest group right now is the 18 to 24 year olds with 67% vaccination, but that's still far ahead from most parts of the state. So we're doing a really great job with our vaccination program right now. Really proud of everything that the clinic and everyone's done for that.
All right. So I read that we are possibly getting third doses recommended to us to the general population this month. Is there what's going on with that?
Yeah, no, that's understandable. So the FDA did recommend booster shots. Currently, it's just for those that are immunocompromised or elderly. They usually classify that as individuals over 65. We have been reaching out to those that have immunosuppressed or immunocompromised conditions and stuff on the reservation, and been trying to bring in some of them for booster shots at this point. There is some uncertainty as far as how things are going from the FDA and the CDC. It appears, Pfizer is going to be available before Moderna because they've been approved by the FDA. And Moderna is still working on submitting some of the data for that. Most of the population won't be able to get boosters, though, in our area until the Moderna is approved. And prioritization with CDC isn't quite clear. So whether or not they're going to put frontline workers, teachers and stuff again at the front of the line, we're not sure. But that's kind of where we are with that right now.
So if you have had Moderna, you have to get your booster shot with the same type of vaccine, right?
You should. They don't recommend mixing and matching vaccine cocktails, so yes.
That doesn't sound good.
It's not.
Okay, so one claim that I know we've talked about before, but I just see it a lot on social media, is about the vaccine causing miscarriages or infertility. Can you just talk about what the truth is behind that?
Yeah, and I've heard and seen stuff about that as well. People that want to, raise their kids naturally and healthy, that's great, and I totally understand them wanting their kids to be healthy, but it's just not true. So data submitted to the CDC, conducted by various universities across the country, have shown that, it's not only safe for pregnant women and breastfeeding women to get vaccinated, it is safer for them to get vaccinated than not to. They can pass on their antibodies to their newborns, which will give them a much greater chance of having a chance of not getting COVID altogether, having an asymptomatic case, or having a very mild case of COVID. Additionally, there hasn't been any data coming out that suggests that it causes infertility. I know there haven't been some long-term studies of 5 and 10 years out, but right now it still looks very safe. People that have gotten vaccinated have had no problems getting pregnant, so that's encouraging. And if you are thinking about having a baby, are pregnant, are breastfeeding, we would encourage you to get vaccinated, because it's much easier to take the small vaccination than to fight off an infection for an extended period of time, especially when you're kind of sleep deprived like new mothers tend to be.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I keep hearing that our numbers right now for COVID cases are worse than what they were this time last year. So is that true, first of all?
I think it's slightly conflated. So this time last year, we'd had about 34 cases in the community, anywhere between 2 to 8 active cases at any one time. Right now, we have about 8 or 9 active cases. We had, I believe it was 7 crop up this last week. We were down to about 4 active cases. So some people got better, a few other people got it. So we're kind of at the same place right now. But it's really hard to say whether or not we're at the same place we were last year. I've seen models that estimate that, we're going to see another 600,000 to 1.5 million cases per month across the country. We have reports from our partners and allies at ThedaCare saying, September is probably going to be our peak month. It really depends on what kind of mathematical model you're using. And it also is really dependent on what variables emerge. We may just deal with the Delta variant and a new variant called Mu this year. If so, we might be okay. But perhaps Mu, which they think might kind of circumvent vaccinational immunity, it could be a real problem, but we don't know yet. So there's a lot of speculation out there right now, and so it's kind of hard to predict. Personally, I think we're doing pretty good. So we know a lot more people are vaccinated, which wasn't even an option last year this time. So I don't think we're quite where we were last year. So just leave it at that.
Okay. Well, yeah. That's good. We don't want a repeat of last year, that's for sure. So something that I just hear a lot is, it seems like with things being how they are now, we were shut down at last year at the same point that we were now. So why are we still open?
I think there are 2 major reasons for that right now. And one is our knowledge base. Last year when COVID hit, we knew next to nothing about, how fast COVID would travel, who was most at risk, what, if any, long-term complications could come up, and who might, how many people might potentially get it. There were a lot of unknowns, and we've done a lot more experiments. We have a much firmer base, knowledge base of what we're dealing with at this point. So we know who we need to protect, how we need to protect them, things like that. 2 is, when COVID first hit us last year, about this time, there were next to no treatment options on the table for us. Right now we have one FDA-approved vaccine for it. It's the Pfizer one, like we talked about. We have two others that have the emergency use authorization. It's the Moderna and the Johnson & Johnson vaccines. They've done a really good job of preserving and promoting immunity. We also know that we can use things like convalescent plasma. They're reserving that for the most severe cases because it's a fairly limited resource at this time. And we've also seen that there have been medications that have been used off-label, by various frontline physicians to treat COVID. Can't really endorse those for legal reasons here, but there are options and discussion out there regarding how to treat COVID before it becomes a major medical emergency. So overall, I think we're doing significantly better, and that's part of the reason we're not shut down. We know that if you get it, we're going to isolate you. It's going to take 2 weeks before you can really come back to action and be in good shape again. And so we've just found out how to take precautions. I think that's why we can function at a more normal pace than we have been.
So Vaughn, do you have anything else to add before we wrap it up?
There was one study that came out this last week from the CDC that I found fairly encouraging, and they found that approximately 80% of the U.S. population has some level of immunity to COVID-19. Now, there were some caveats you got to throw in there. They only had a sample of 1.4 million blood draws, which is a really good sample. It's very strong for representing all ethnicities. I can speak today, and regions of the country. What they did bring up, though, was their work was mainly done pre-Delta variant, pre-Mu variant. And so they're like, we're not sure what's going to happen with that. But right now, most of the country has some level of immunity from the original wild type, the alpha, beta strains, etc. and stuff. So I think there's hope on the horizon, if I can speak.
All right. Thank you, Vaughn.
You bet. Thank you.
Waiwanan for listening to the Menominee Indian Tribe Wisconsin podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also listen to the podcast on menominee-nsn.gov under the Community tab. Keep up to date by following us on Facebook at MITW Podcast. I do weekly updates with Vaughn and welcome any questions you have regarding COVID-19, so please send those to us via email at podcast@mitw.org.